Tyler up in Tacoma, Washington, he said, I know your heart lies with the BCS. Hand to heart, yes, it does. But out of all the formats that have been discussed, which one is the best for the sport and everyone involved? He's talking about the playoff formats. So what Tyler said is true. If you're new to the show, I don't even need a playoff. My personal preference is I want the regular season and I want bowl season, and I don't even care if it's just the AP 1 versus 2 like they did way back in the day. I wouldn't mind if it were the BCS all over again, but obviously that's not going to happen. So out of all the formats I've seen floating around, I do have a favorite. It doesn't sound like it's the one they're going to go with, but out of all the proposed models, I've just been asking myself selfishly, how do I get what I want? So what I want is just maximum urgency on every regular season game, and I want conference games to have maximum meaning, and I want the conference races to have maximum meaning. So I like the 14-team model, but I like it with the AQ format baked in. Now, I've always been anti-automatic qualifier when the fields were smaller. Like when they were talking about going to 6, or they were talking about, I thought they were talking about going to 8. In reality, they just hoodwinked us all. But when they were talking about that, I didn't want any automatic qualifiers because those fields are still small enough to where every regular season game matters, because whether it's 4 or 6, like you lose a game, you could be out. You lose 2 games, you probably are out. And I looked at it and I said, okay, well, at that point, I don't want any automatic qualifiers. I just want the best 6 or the best 8, and I was done with it. But when you're talking about 14 or 16, I'm talking about 14 here, but if they go to 16, I feel the same way. There's no way to crystallize the urgency of the regular season if you're just taking the top 14 or 16. You are talking about knowing ahead of time you can lose a quarter of your games. If you're in the SEC or the Big Ten especially, you can lose a quarter of your games and make the thing. So what I want is I want to remove the committee as much as possible. I want to remove as much guarantee as possible. Now you're listening to that and you're saying, Josh, that's very hypocritical, because you're advocating for the model where the conferences know how many teams they're going to get in. That's true. But there's a way to eliminate the guarantees, team specific, while also maintaining that the Big Ten knows they're going to get 4 in. So here's how that model sounds. That model would be the 4-4-2-2-1-1. Someone get the acronym for that. I was on with Chris Hassel on CBS HQ earlier today, and we made an acronym for that. It is every bit as ridiculous as it sounds. But for real, follow me here. 14 teams with the AQ format. So that means the SEC gets 4, the Big Ten gets 4, the ACC gets 2, the Big 12 gets 2, the G5 gets 1, and then there's a spot where either Notre Dame takes it or it's 1 at large. Because there's one thing that separates me from, I think, a lot of folks who prefer the 16-team model. I don't really like there being a bunch of at-large spots. Because if we're going with this big a field, I absolutely want that first Saturday in December to be reimagined. And I like the idea of those conference play-in sort of mini brackets, but I want those to be real play-in games. I don't want you to be able to play a 3 versus 6 game in the Big Ten, but know all the while, hey, even if we lose this game, we weren't good enough to play in our conference title game, but even if we lose this game, hey, quick timeout. Check and see if you're subscribed to the YouTube channel. If you're not, I humbly ask that you click subscribe. It's free. It doesn't sign you up for anything. What it does is it helps us keep this show free so we can just do college football year-round. All right, back to the clip. We'll just fall to one of the at-large spots. I want them to be real play-in games. So I am in favor of the 14 team over the 16 team for that very reason. This is how you eliminate the committee as well, because there are no really at-large spots. Like all the committee's doing is determining what, the G5 spot? And then they would seed the thing after conference championship weekend, but like the committee has minimal involvement here. That first Saturday in December is the key. And I know that there are a lot of people watching right now who are repulsed at the idea of the AQ structure. But I'm telling you guys, the reasons that you're repulsed by it are the reasons I used to be but have flipped. This is actually how you crystallize value in the regular season. Follow me here. That first Saturday in December, to be clear, what they're talking about and what I would support is the SEC and the Big Ten. You're not just taking their top 4 teams. What you're doing is you're taking their top 2 teams and they go to Atlanta and they go to Indianapolis and they play their conference championship game. The only guarantees for the SEC going into that weekend is that their top 2 teams are going to make the playoff. One of them will win their conference championship game, and they'll probably go get one of the 2 byes. But those 1 and 2s, those 2 teams are going to go. That's the reward you get for making your conference championship game, and you'll get an added reward of probably a first-round bye if you win that conference championship game. But outside of that, I want no guarantees. So you got that conference championship game, SEC and Big Ten, and then 3 versus 6 and 4 versus 5. I would love those games to be on campuses, on campi. And so I would love 6 to go play at 3, and I would love 5 to go play at 4. And you know what? If you lose a home playoff game and you fall out of the playoff, then you fall out of the playoff. But for all the talk about it's so sideways and backwards to guarantee the SEC and the Big Ten spots, it's true that it's valid to feel that way, but there's only 2 guarantees in this format. The rest of it is folks playing themselves into a spot. So I prefer that. And then in the ACC and the Big 12, this is where I have to bend because it probably does away with the idea of the ACC championship game and the Big 12 championship game. There is no perfect format out there. But in the ACC, I would prefer to do their 2 play-in games to decide their 2 spots. 4 versus 1 at number 1's home stadium. 3 versus 2 at number 2's home stadium. Same thing in the Big 12. If the ACC championship game means that much to you, if the Big 12 championship game means that much to you, I would just say this format's probably not for you. Candidly, I don't ever remember a huge deal being made about those games. And if you know you've got 2 guaranteed spots at the table, I think this is a more preferable way to do it. Just personal preference, but that's where I am. The G5, pretty straightforward. The highest ranked G5 team gets the G5 spot. If Notre Dame's in the top 14, they take the other spot. If Notre Dame's not in the top 14, that is the only at-large spot I've got in this thing. If Notre Dame had a bad year, there is 1 at-large spot because they didn't take the other one. To where, okay, one of the Big Ten teams is probably going to get in, one of the SEC teams are probably going to get in, but that is a very narrow window that most years won't even be available. So the playoff arrives at that point, and just I want you to I don't want to skip past this. That Saturday, that first Saturday in December, I want you to think about what your mentality has been leading up to this and why I prefer this, whereas I never would have preferred the automatic qualifier structure before. Nobody has focused on committee rankings. If you're an Ole Miss fan, you have not been worried 1 second about where the committee has you ranked. The only thing you've been focused on is what are the league standings. We play Tennessee this week. We got to make sure we beat Tennessee so that we remain one of the top 6 teams in this conference, because that's how we get into that play-in week, the first Saturday in December. Ditto for Iowa fans or Michigan fans in the Big Ten. Doesn't matter what the committee thinks about you, because you're going to determine if you play your way in, and once you play your way in, where you fall. Like, that's how that works. But I also think it takes the maximum focus possible and places it on conference games, conference races, and regular season games. Because also remember this, there is no guarantee. The only guarantee, even for SEC and Big Ten teams in this format, to make the playoff is being in the top 2. Even the number 3 team knows, hey, we're going to get a home game the first Saturday in December, but if we lose that thing, we're out. We don't even make the playoff. We're out. That's the maximum amount of urgency I could possibly put on a 14-team playoff format that deep in November in the Power 2 conferences. It's the most you could possibly hope for. Whereas if you just take the top 14 or the top 16, I know the logic behind that. I'm telling you, it totally and completely erodes and saturates the value of those regular season games and the urgency of those regular season games. And what it also does is it brings that ratchet committee back into the equation and Tuesday nights in the fall become the focal point? Where are 12 ADs who you know good and well don't watch this sport like you and I do going to rank my team? I'm so tired of that, so tired of it. And so I would love to do away with that. So when the playoff arrives, the committee does not really rank the teams anymore. They're not selecting them, they're just kind of placing them. They would seed the thing. That's really all we would need them for. They're going to tell us which G5 team's coming. And then after the dust settles on that first Saturday, they're going to seed the playoff, and the number 1 and number 2 teams are going to get byes, which again crystallizes the importance of winning your conference. Probably going to be the SEC and the Big Ten champ. That's not guaranteed, though. If Clemson goes and runs through the ACC, it's very likely they would be one of the top 2 seeds. So it's not like those spots are locked in for the SEC and the Big Ten, although I would guess more than likely it would be those two. But you'd have 6 games in that first round. I mean, I think you can pretty well envision how that bracket would play out. But one thing, some of you sent me a clip from Klatt the other day that he said, and I've agreed with this. Klatt said it the other day, so I'll agree with it as well. He is of the opinion, as am I, that once you get past that first round, we ought to reseed the whole thing. So that if you are the true number 1 overall seed, or even the number 2 overall seed in this playoff, not only have you been rewarded with a first round bye because you won your conference, but you also know you're not locked into a static bracket. They're going to play the first round games, and then if you're the number 1 seed, not only did you not have to play that first week, but you're guaranteed to play the lowest remaining seed in the second round. And you should get them on your home campus because the first 2 rounds, not just the first round, should be on home campuses. That's how I would prefer for that to work. The ACC and the Big 12 flaw, I think one of the biggest areas of pushback I'm going to get on this, aside from the people who just think it should be no automatic qualifiers, which is its own thing, I think a lot of people are going to push back and say, so you want to keep the SEC and the Big 10 title game, but you're okay doing away with the ACC and the Big 12 title game? I'm not okay with any of it. You asked me what I thought the best format was out of the possible available formats, and I think this is it. There is no plan that's void of some collateral damage. But if I have to trade the ACC championship game and the Big 12 championship game, still getting 2 teams from those conferences, but if I have to trade that in exchange for the urgency that I know this places on the regular season, then you get a yes vote from me on that. Now, I do know that at the SEC spring meetings, the coaches today were presented with a model that was 5 automatic qualifiers and then 11 at-larges. You will be not so surprised to learn that most of the SEC coaches were in favor of that. Well, of course they are. Of course they are, because they then know they can probably lose 3 games per season and make it in. I mean, Kalen DeBoer knows last year's team makes it in the playoff if you're going 5 AQs and 11 at-large spots. Of course they do. I don't think that's best for the game. That's me personally. So if we were doing a 6-team field or an 8-team field, I wouldn't want any automatic qualifiers. But if we're going 14 or 16 deep, you do understand you will have a 4-loss team that makes that playoff if you just go top 16. That will eventually happen. And several 3-loss teams. So in principle, I already hate all playoff expansion. But out of the available remaining formats that they're seriously looking at, I like 14 with automatic qualifier the best, with the entire reimagined first Saturday in December. Okay, crush me in the comments.